this?
Well, we do have live organized people in this country, as we've seen over the past few months, but they're not the live organized people that you and I grew up belonging to and being active with. They are live organized people who mostly are responding to calls from right-wing commercial radio station commentators and television hosts who are doing things like protesting against taxation, against the government, against what they call socialism, against the Obama health care plan, whatever they think of it as. What do you make of this kind of what Pat Buchanan once called peasants with pitchforks approach to public policy coming from the right in the streets and in the media of this country with a certain amount of vehemence and a certain following as well? There were, I don't know how many people, but it seemed to me from looking at television coverage, maybe a couple of 100,000 people who marched in Washington a couple of weeks ago under various banners of the right. What do you make of this and the implications for small d democratic government in the United States?
Well, I think the implications are dangerous, but and it's easy to ridicule them. You know, look at the crazy things they say. You want to kill my grandmother, you know, and so on. And there's a lot of nonsense. That's true. But what we really ought to be asking ourselves is why the peace movement, the left, the activist organizations aren't organizing these people. I mean, a lot of what they're protesting is pretty sensible. I mean, a lot of the protests, for example, are against the bailout, the massive bailout. You know, they feel that they were betrayed. You know, they worked very hard to prevent it, and 2 minutes later they got it. And why should the bankers end up from the recession more powerful than they were before, which is what's happening? You can read it in the business press. They're exulting about it. They're more powerful than they were before. The big banks are even bigger than they were. The government insurance policy, the too big to fail insurance policy, is guaranteeing them that they can continue doing exactly what they were doing, which tanked the economy. They can make risky loans and investments. Since it's risky, they'll make a lot of profit. Money coming out of their ears. If it collapses, the taxpayer will come in and bail them out because they're too big to fail. Bonuses and profits are going through the roof, and meanwhile people are suffering. Well, they have a reason to protest that. But the tragedy is that the protests and many other things, the protests are being organized by pretty much the same sectors that are creating the crisis. I mean, the corporate money that's behind them is the ones who are very happy that it's coming out like this. And it's a real failure of the activist movements, the left, the peace movement, so on, that we're not organizing. I think that's the question we ought to ask. And there are other things. I mean, there are historical memories that are awakened. You don't want to draw analogies too closely, but there's some similarities which are not encouraging, certainly for someone my age. These people have real grievances. I mean, I have not seen a demographic analysis of, those who call in on talk shows, but I listen to them a lot, and they're interesting. I mean, if you sort of suspend disbelief, you forget about reality of the world, and just listen, it's not a joke. If you listen, the message that comes across has an internal logic to it. It's coherent. It gives answers to people who want answers and need them and deserve them. They're crazy answers, but they're not hearing any others. I mean, these are people who've, they're done everything right, Christian, God-fearing, take care of their families, and for 30 years they've been shafted. But somebody's got to give them an answer. Why?
The media has always had the function in this country of suspension of disbelief, but that has traditionally been called entertainment. What you're saying is the suspension of disbelief has, we've left Edward R. Murrow behind a long time ago, that firewall between the entertainment, the Jack Benny part and Milton Berle part of media, for those of you who go back that far, and the Edward R. Murrow part of media, that wall has come down. And what you're now saying is that the suspension of disbelief is a characteristic of especially broadcast media in all of its domains, supposed entertainment, infotainment, and information.
So that's happening, but I don't really think that's the main problem. I was not a great admirer of the media in the earlier period. In fact, I think they're pretty awful. In many ways, I think they're better now than they were 30, 40 years ago, because the country is better. It's a more civilized country. The media reflect that. I think I'm not really thinking about the entertainment aspect of the media, though yes, it's significant. I'm thinking about the part that has substantive content, crazy content, but it is substantive. It does give answers. I mean, to people who for the last 30 years have seen their wages, income stagnate or decline, benefits decline, services decline. There's nothing for the children. You know, the world's out of control. These are the people who, on polls, maybe 80% of them, say the country's going in the wrong direction. The government's run by the few and the special interests, not the people, and so on. You know, they're not wrong. This is all happening to them, and the answers that they're getting from, say, you know, Rush Limbaugh, Michael Savage, the rest of them, are, well, we have an answer. The rich liberals own everything. They own the corporations. They run the government. They run the media, and they don't care about people like you. They don't care about the flyover people between the East Coast and the West Coast. They only care about giving everything you worked for away to, you know, to illegal immigrants or, you know, gays or something. So we got to protect ourselves from them. And furthermore, they run the government. When they put up a health program, it's not to give you health; it's to kill your granny. You know? And that's an answer to something. It's a terrible answer, but it is an answer. And if you do suspend disbelief, you forget about what's happening in the world, really, it's a coherent answer. Now, they're not hearing anything else. And the memory that comes to my mind, again, I don't want to press the analogy too hard, but I think it's worth thinking about, is late Weimar Germany. There were people with real grievances. The Nazis gave them an answer. It's the fault of the Jews and the Bolsheviks, and we've got to protect ourselves from them. And that'll take care of your grievances. And we know what happened. Germany in the 1920s was, you know, the most civilized, the peak of Western civilization in the arts and the sciences, highly democratic, functioning democratic institutions. A decade later, it was, you know, the pits of human history. Again, the analogy is not, it's not close, but it's frightening. And unless an answer can be given to these people, unless they can be led to understand what's really happening to them, we could be in for trouble.
Well, let me